They don't have the faintest idea what we're dealing with here.
Who's that, matron?
The War Office. The principal matron is asking for the names of territorial force nurses who might serve in France. Territorial nurses are not recruited to go overseas. She knows I don't have enough nurses here in Cardiff.
Miss Elizabeth Ann Montgomery Wilson was principal matron at the 3rd Western General Hospital in Cardiff. She was responsible for providing nurses for between 2,000 and 3,000 beds at different locations.
See what you can do for the private admitted yesterday, Sister Nesbitt. Gunshot wounds to the shoulder, listed as dangerous. Morphine, I think.
Yes, Miss Wilson. What's his name?
Leopold. John Leopold, Australian Forces. Tied up into Cardiff family.
Yes, matron. Wounded in action in France, 29th of July. Admitted to 57th Field Ambulance with shrapnel wounds and fractured right shoulder. Transferred to casualty clearing station, then to ambulance train. Admitted to hospital at Rouen Hospital Ship Aberdonian. Arrived Cardiff August the 1st. John? John? Can you hear me, John?
The wire is too strong. We can't go that way. Why don't they tell us to withdraw? We need to withdraw.
Shh, there. It's over. You're safe now.
Can't you see them? Men falling everywhere. Stop those bloody machine guns.
There. They've stopped now. Listen.
Where am I?
In hospital. In Cardiff.
Where's that?
Wales. Now, lie still while I clean your wound. Just a little iodine for the infection. Where are you from, John?
Boots Galley.
Where's Boots Gully?
You don't know Boots Galley? Mining country. Malapeeps. Water races. The roof. Mind the bloody roof.
Was your father a coal miner?
Coal, no. Gold. Slushing mine. Mate did he party when a fair size nugget turned up. The roof. Dad, the roof!
What happened?
It fell. Never stood a chance. I need to get home. My mum, she needs me.
There. Now lie still.
And so, Rwanda returns. Where might you have been, Private Leopold? At my dad's funeral, sir.
Who are you talking to, John?
You shall forfeit 3 days' pay and receive a £1 fine. Now get back to your duty. Stop those bloody machine guns! Is there anybody there? I can't see.
Excuse me, matron, the girls are here with their entertainment? Oh, I thought I could hear a good deal of clamour. Which school are they from this week? Lindy Park Girls' School, more than 40 of them. Well, make sure the men mind their language. Yes, matron. The girls have bought sweets for the interval and dozens of freshly laid eggs. Oh, our men will be on the lookout for cigarettes. Oh, ask the teacher to come and have a word with me before she leaves. No, Sister Davis.
Yes, Miss Wilson.
Sister Nesbitt,
Yes, matron.
you will need to write to the family.
Yes, matron.
You know what to say.
Yes, matron. Dear Mrs. Lakewood, I feel I must write to you as I had your dear laddie in my ward and I was with him when he died. I don't know what to say to you. Words at such a time are of poor comfort. My heart just aches for you. It may comfort you a little to know that despite of all his pain, he was a brave, dear fellow and a soldier to the last. He died very peacefully. The short time he was with us, he talked a great deal about you and wanted to get home to be with his mother. I told him I was his mother while he was in hospital, and a short time after he was recovering from an acute bout of pain and he had tight hold of my hand, he said, "You won't leave me, will you, little mother?" I have sent you a few of the things he had with him. The label was tied into his shirt coming over, and the identification disc and 2 little coins were around his neck. The clergyman who's buried him is going to write to you. He is an Australian. I and 2 of my nurses went with him to his last resting place this afternoon, and I thought of his mother, so far away, and I prayed that God might bless and comfort her in her great grief. With deepest sympathy from us all, Sister Nesbitt, Ninian Park Hospital.
Shrapnel and machine gun fire destroyed men's flesh and left behind some of the worst injuries ever seen. Many wounds were heavily contaminated with dirt from the trenches and the battlefield. Antiseptic treatments, such as regular irrigation with saline, were in the early stages of development.
You wanted to speak to me, matron?
Oh, yes, Miss
Kendrick.
Ah, yes, Miss Kendrick. I wanted to thank you personally for bringing the girls along to entertain our soldiers.
We can do so little to help the war effort, matron. Unlike you.
Well, that may not be so. We are very much in need of a bath chair, Miss Kendrick, and would be most grateful if Ninian Park Girls' School were able to raise funds to acquire one.
Oh, I'll speak to the headmistress. Perhaps we could have a presentation. Oh, something in the newspaper. Oh,
Yes. I'm afraid I must ask you to leave now, Miss Kendrick.
Oh, of course. I'll gather the girls together. Girls! Girls! My dearest mother, we have had the worst winter in the memory of living men. It has been a regular old timer one reads about. Early in March we had a blizzard. It snowed for 2 weeks on end. And then at the end of March, another blizzard lasting 2 days. And in that time, the drifts of snow were 20 feet deep, and a number of people perished in them. All trains were stopped. Some snowed up, and all telegraph wires were down. The poles simply smashed up in the gale like reeds. The wires weighed tons and were like great white ropes as thick as one's arm. 2 motor buses were snowed up outside our village in the street. Oh, it was pretty trying at night keeping watch on top of the viaduct, as it is so exposed. All the reserves are now formed into one, with headquarters in London, and we are now called the Royal Defence Corps, as the King wanted to show his appreciation of the service of the various corps. Your loving son, Ivan.
Herbert Ivan Babbage was born in Adelaide, Victoria, but grew up in New Zealand. He became an artist and studied at the London School of Art and the Academy Julian in Paris. He settled in St Austell, Cornwall, and set up a studio there. In 1914, he joined the Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry, but was transferred to the Royal Defence Corps. This was comprised of soldiers either too old or medically unfit for active frontline service. The role of the Corps was to provide troops for security and guard duties inside the United Kingdom, guarding important locations such as ports or bridges. It also provided independent companies for guarding prisoner of war camps.
Thought you weren't turning up tonight.
I haven't missed a duty in 2 years. I'm not about to let these cathedral walls get blown up now.
Aye, they carry the lifeblood of the war effort, all right. What's the matter? You look awful.
That'll pass.
Here, put this round you. You should go home.
Home? What do you know of home? I have a home.
Where are you founding?
Wanganui.
Wanga what?
Wanganui.
Not easy to get your tongue round that.
It's easier than Gorchakoi.
Aye, I'll give you that. Where is it?
Van Diemen's Land, New Zealand.
So is that where you're from?
Well, yes and no. My mother fled there from Adelaide after my father was jailed for 7 years hard labour.
What did he do?
He was a teller with the bank in Adelaide. He used to speculate a bit on the stock market and he ended up losing a lot of money.
And you got 7 years with hard labour?
Well, yeah, and that and forging a banknote for $10,000. Another $1,500 for embezzlement.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, my mother just couldn't take the shame.
No, I can imagine.
All after having married into such an illustrious family.
Really?
Yeah, my great-grandfather, he worked in the bank as well. His son used his inheritance to pay for this development of the difference engine.
His what?
World's first computer. He was held by a lady called Ada Lovelace.
You're Charles Babbage's grandson?
Great-grandson.
Damn. Oh, I'm honoured to know you.
Don't be.
What do you do? I mean, what did you do before the war?
Paint.
Paint?
Yeah, I did a watercolour of this not that long ago.
Of the viaduct?
My tomb.
Shh, now. There's plenty of life in you yet.
You see its dark walls looming up in front of you? The pillars of hell!
Hey there! Over here! Quickly! This man has collapsed!
Ivan Babbage was taken to the 3rd Western General Hospital in Cardiff. Surgeons operated on his rectal cancer, but it was too late. He died in October 1916.
The death is announced of Mr. Herbert Ivan Babbage, 3rd son of Mr. and Mrs. C.W. Babbage, of Wanganui, former of Hawera. Mr. Babbage had adopted the profession of artist, and after forwarding himself as far as possible in New Zealand, went to England. There he pursued his studies diligently and with a success that justified the early promise he had shown. Later on, he travelled a good deal in Europe, all the time adding to his reputation. Last year, he gained the distinction of having one of his pictures accepted by the Royal Academy and hung on the line, a coveted concession. Very general regret will be felt by Hawera friends at his untimely death. It is not suggested that he was killed in action, and we understand he had not been accepted for military service abroad, though he had offered himself. But he had been serving on patrol duty, and curiously among his first work was the duty of helping to guard an important bridge in South Wales, designed by none other than the great Isambard Kingdom Brunel, a friend, we are given to believe, of Ivan's great-grandfather, Charles Babbage.
Matron, I'm very sorry, but I've forgotten where the bedpans are. Nurse, I'm sorry, it's just everything's new here, and I thought I knew where they were, but...
Nurse! Nurse!
What is it, Private Wallops?
I can't sleep, nurse.
Try counting sheep.
I've got a better idea.
What might that be?
Well, you could read me a bedtime story.
How long have you been here now, Arthur?
Nearly 3 months, I reckon.
And in all that time, have you ever known any of the nurses to read bedtime stories?
Now would be a good time to start. Come on, sit here. I've got a book.
What book?
Come and have a look. First you've got to tell me your name.
I'm not sure I should.
Struth, of course you should. I know all the nurses' names, especially the pretty ones.
It's Millie.
Millie. Say good day to Molly.
Moll Flanders, Daniel Defoe. I've read that book. She tricked men into marrying her and then was sentenced to death by hanging in Newgate prison.
Well, she was sent to the colonies instead, lucky girl. I end up in this bloody war.
Not to escape hanging, I'm sure.
No. Worse than that.
What could be worse than that?
My wife.
Stop it.
Serious. I spent 12 months in Darlinghurst jail. It was that who'll give her more than 22 shillings a week. And then I enlisted. That was worse than jail.
What happened?
I was court-martialed.
What for?
Being absent without leave reduced me to the bloody ranks. So I broke camp. I refused to follow orders.
Sounds awful.
They gave me 7 days field punishment. Do you know what field punishment is, Millie?
No.
It's when they strap you to a fence, like a dog, or to a gun wheel, and they leave you out there for several hours a day, often within range of enemy fire. Well, we Aussies, we wouldn't have it!
It sounds awful.
If you think that was bad, you want to see what they did to the poor conchies. Where?
Miss Harding! Miss Harding, there are bedpans need empty.
Yes, matron.
Arthur Waddops enlisted with the Australian Imperial Force in 1914. In April 1916, he had been transferred to hospital at Cairo with venereal disease.
In September, he was admitted to hospital in Belgium suffering from influenza.
In October, he was admitted to hospital in France with colic.
In November, he was again admitted to hospital with influenza.
Later that month, he was admitted to hospital with debility and suspected enteric. He was reported as being seriously ill with an abscess on the liver.
On New Year's Eve, he embarked from Le Havre, France, on hospital ship Valdivia, suffering from pleurisy. He was admitted to 3rd Western General Hospital, Cardiff, Wales, on New Year's Day 1917.
Nurse! Nurse! dying, nurse.
I suppose that's your idea of an April Fool's Day joke.
Oh, joke. I'm bloody dying.
What is it you want?
I need to make sure that my belongings get to my mother.
I'll make some tea.
Promise.
Is she your next of kin?
Yeah.
You don't have a wife?
Well, I didn't join the war to get away from the bloody wallabies now, did I?
If you have a wife, then she is your next of kin. Now rest, and I'll get the tea.
I had a daughter too. She'd be 8 years old now. If she'd lived. Ah! Ah!
Wilson. Police records would like to know what you remember of Private Arthur Wadhouse.
Don't they realise? We have convoys arriving every other day. Many of the soldiers are very sick. They need specialised care. And I am being asked to recommend my best nurses to go to the front.
The family have written to the Red Cross asking for details of his last few hours and his burial.
Oh, Miss Beatrice Huddlestone has just sent in her resignation. And one of the nurses I mobilised said she must stay home with her invalid mother. What am I supposed to do?
Private Arthur Wadhouse, matron.
Who? Oh, yes. Died April the 1st. Nurse Harding was with him that morning. He was laughing and joking with her.
Yet he died later that afternoon.
Yes. Several of the patients went to the funeral. We had a photograph taken of the wreath and the funeral leaving the hospital.
Yes, but what do you remember of him, matron?
Well, Arthur has been on the ward a long time. We have got used to his playful ways. If you think his mother would like copies of the photographs, then we can have them sent to you. Nurse Harding wrote to her, but was unable to find an address.
His records clearly show it. Mrs. Ellen Wadhouse, 331 Harris Street, Piedmont, Sydney.
Sergeant
Blake, ma'am.
Sergeant Blake. Perhaps you are not aware, but we are about to open another hospital in Bridgend, and I do not have one single trained nurse to send there. Many are away on sick leave, some wish to get married, and others want to leave the service altogether. I had hoped that a nurse we transferred to Leeds would be replaced by one from Leeds. That, however, has not happened. My priority must be for the care of my patients, Sergeant Blake. Now, if you will forgive me.
Base Records has received a letter from Mrs. Ellen Wadhouse, next of kin to Private Arthur Wadhouse, requesting that his belongings be sent to her.
That is not my responsibility, Sergeant Blake. Now, good day.
Base Records has also received a letter from Mrs. Alice Wadhouse, widow of Private Arthur Wadhouse, requesting that his belongings be sent to her.
Sergeant, good day.
November 27th, 1917. Mrs. Ellen Wadhouse wrote to Base Records asking,
It's been 8 months since my son died. I'd be pleased to know if his personal belongings and his paybook have yet been dispatched.
Base Records replied that the parcel of his son's personal belongings had been sent to his wife.
I would be grateful if the war gratuity payable in respect to the services of my son be sent to me, his next of kin.
December 1917. Mrs. Alice Waddups, wife of Private Arthur Waddups, wrote to Base Records asking,
Can she put in a claim for his deferred pay? I had letters sent back to me with his personal effects, which his mother sent to him, urging him to make a will in her favour so as to prevent me from getting his money. He was on active service for over 2 years, and for 12 months I received £1 8 shillings per week, which was later reduced to £1 2 and 6 per week until he died. Will you let me know if she can make a claim for his pay?
Mrs. Alice Waddups duly received a war pension, 1914-15 Star, British Medal, Victory Medal, Memorial Scroll, and Memorial Plaque.
Arthur Waddups is remembered on his mother's headstone, located in Rookwood Cemetery, Sydney, New South Wales. The inscription reads, Sergeant, my AIF son, died Cardiff, Wales.
How is Private Olson, Miss Harding?
He's come to us in a pretty bad way, Miss Wilson.
Symptoms?
Cough, acute shortness of breath, weakness, infected mucus, temperature of 102.
Lawrence John Olson was born in Norway. He was working as a bridge builder in Brisbane when he enlisted in December 1917. He was 42 and single. He lodged his will with the officer in charge at Base Records, requesting that his property should go to Mrs. Wright of Tivoli Boarding House, Townsville. But he named his next of kin as Mrs. Olson of London Boarding House, Maryborough, stating that she was just a friend.
Lawrence embarked from Sydney on the SS Ormond in March 1918. Whilst at sea, he was put on report for being absent without leave for 6¼ hours. He was fined 2 days' pay.
In April 1918, Lawrence joined the Australian camp at Suez. He was soon put on report for drunkenness and being out of bounds. He was given 14 days field punishment and fined £3 10. He was transferred overseas and disembarked in Southampton on the 15th of May.
Lawrence was admitted to 3rd Western General Hospital in June 1918, and for a while he began to improve.
But in July, his pulse weakened. He died suddenly of cardiac failure. He was buried at Cathays Cemetery 3 days later. Some of the Australian soldiers convalescing in Ninian Park Hospital attended the funeral, and a wreath was laid by the Australian Red Cross.
Christmas or not, Mother, the Ulysses ball's on December 22nd, and I intend to be on board.
But you've only just come out of isolation hospital after that terrible throat infection, Eric.
2 days, it was nothing.
Oh, just stay for Christmas. It wouldn't be the same without you.
There's a war on, Lizzie. You don't think the Germans are going to care whether you had four sons home for Christmas or not?
It might be the last time that we do, Bill.
What the citizen forces at the Kulong say? He's done his training. It'd be treason for him not to go now.
We voted against conscription twice. Have you forgotten the poster? Ladies! Ladies!
Why is your face so white, Mother? Why do you choke for breath?
Oh, I have dreamt in the night, my son, that I doomed a man to death.
Why do you hide your hand, mother, and crouch above it in dread?
It beareth a dreadful brand, my son, and the dead man's blood 'tis red. I hear his widow cry in the night, I hear his children cry, and always within my sight, O God, the death man's blood doth leap.
They put a dagger into my grasp. It seemed but a pencil then. I did not know it was a fiend, a gasp for the priceless blood of men.
They gave me the ballot paper, the grim death warrant of doom, and I smugly sentenced the man to death in that dreadful little room.
I put it inside the box of blood, nor thought of the man I'd slain, till at midnight came like a whelming flood, God's word and the brand of Cain.
O little son, O my little son, pray God for your mother's soul, that the scarlet stain may be white again, in God's great judgment roll. Those 28,000 boys we lost on the Somme are not coming back, Bill. Don't ask our son to be one of them.
All the other recruits at board members are all going, Mum. It's the right thing to do. You'll see. We'll be back before you know it.
You take the chance to see some of the rest of the world before you come back here, son.
You'd think he was going on an adventure, not going to war.
You might get to visit Glasgow, see where your granddad was born. Hey, listen, you make sure those British sergeant majors treat you with respect, Eric. You're not from combat stock, you know?
Yes, Dad.
Warm clothing, that's what he's going to need. It's so cold over there.
Don't fuss, Mum.
Eric McCleary left Melbourne on December the 22nd, 1917. He joined the 37th Battalion at the front. This battalion was assisting the advance along the Somme Valley.
Your loving son, Eric McCleary. September 1st, we moved to a forward position, arriving about dawn. We had a hot meal and retired to our billet. Everyone was exhausted after the previous day's continuous fight. We were allotted baths, and half of us took one. Some clean underclothes were issued. The enemy was shelling at almost extreme range, with 4 2-inch high velocity guns. Headquarters got the battalion canteen forward. Blankets were issued. Enemy aircraft were active all through the night.
That day, Private Eric McCleary was admitted to the 9th Field Ambulance with shrapnel wounds to the right thigh. He was taken to hospital at Rouen, then transported to England, where he was admitted to Ninian Park Hospital, Cardiff, with a large flesh wound.
Secondary hemorrhage of the superficial femoral artery and vein.
The 37th Battalion was ordered to disband to provide reinforcements for other battalions. Its commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Story, wrote letters to all his superiors, including the Prime Minister, questioning this order. He was dismissed.
Gangrene of the right foot and leg up to the knee. I'm sorry, lad. I'm afraid we're going to have to amputate. Get the soldier ready, sister.
Yes, Doctor.
The men of the 37th Battalion mutinied.
Septicemia and an abscess on the left foot.
The order to disband the 37th Battalion was temporarily suspended.
Septic diarrhea. Organise intravenous and subcutaneous saline.
September 26th. Total exhaustion. Death occurred at 3:30 p.m. Dear Mr. and Mrs. McCleary, I am told by the Red Cross that you wish to know as much as possible about the death of your son, Private Eric Alexander McCleary. For my part, I can tell you that Eric had a full military funeral, a firing party, bugler and pallbearers. The funeral left the hospital here at 11 a.m. The coffin was of good polished elm, draped with the Union Jack and surmounted by beautiful flowers. It was conveyed to the graveside on a gun carriage. Reverend Macon from the Australian Imperial Force said prayers and the last post was sounded. We in the Ninian Park section of the 3rd Western General Hospital here in Cardiff send our sincere condolences. Sister Davis.
Eric McCleary was 19. In October, the 37th Battalion was disbanded.
Hey John, did you see the recruitment poster they put up in the station?
Yeah, I saw it. Cooey, Romeo, come.
Well?
Well, what?
What do you think?
What do you mean, what do I think? I think Billy Hughes has promised to send 50,000 Australians to the Western Front, and he can't keep his promise.
Well?
Well, what?
Well, anything's better than staying in this ghost town.
I would rather be here than in some goddamn trench being gassed.
The dregs of a bloody use of Gold Town. That's all this place is, but we have no future here.
What about the distillery, eh?
Oh, they're making eucalyptus oil for the rest of our lives. No, thanks. Look, I reckon I can handle a machine gun as well as any pommy.
Answer! We'd have Fritz beaten in no time.
Yeah, and find a couple of French Sheilas to bring back home.
Cooey! Yeah, we'll come!
Albert and John O'Connell sailed from Melbourne on the Ceramic in 1915. They joined the 6th Infantry Brigade, 24th Battalion, 1st Reinforcements.
Last one back in Wedderburn buys the beers then.
Albert joined the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force at Gallipoli in August. He saw little fighting. By September, like so many others, he was being transferred to the 6th Field Ambulance with dysentery. A few days later, he found himself in the Australian Casualty Clearing Station with fever. In October, he was admitted to Brook War Hospital in Woolwich, England. Dysentery was the principal cause of sickness in the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, but Albert survived. He was transferred to Perham Downs in Salisbury, from where he wrote to his mother.
Just a few lines, hoping they will find you as well as I am. I've just shifted into another camp called Bolliston at Salisbury Plain. It's a big camp, and there are a lot of soldiers here. I believe there were 1 million here sometime before I arrived. It is surprising who you meet. I've met nearly all the old boys who were on the Dardanelles with me. I met Harry Foster and young Batty, and one who I never expected to see here, my old mate Ginger Hughes. I got quite a shock when I saw him, and so did he when he saw me. I was just talking about him when he hit me on the shoulder. Oh, he's quite well, but looks thin and miserable. Said he had not written home for a couple of months. So when you get this letter, you can let Mrs. Hughes know I'm in the same camp. We can be together now, and we'll be all right. It's about a month since I heard from Jack. But as nearly all the troops are in England now, I might see or hear of him with the others.
Albert was ready for some real combat at last. But in July, he was admitted to Fargo Military Hospital in Milkshire with conjunctivitis. His mother wrote to Base Records.
I have received notice that my son, Private Albert O'Connell, has been admitted to Fargo Military Hospital, but I have heard no further information. I need to know whether he is still there, as my husband, Sapper J.R. Smith, is in England, and my other son, Private Jack O'Connell, is in the firing line in France. and I have had no news from him since June. Base Records replied, "Dear Mrs. Smith, no further reports have been received regarding Private A. O'Connor, and in absence of any report, favourable progress may be assumed."
How do I tell of this? How does the son tell a mother that he trembles at night? Here, tanks swallowing the mud like drunken hippos. Horse carcasses stink in the field. And the cold, the unutterable cold, it bites at your bones. Bronchitis. A bronchitis is wretched, but it brought me a bed at the casualty clearing station. Then enterers. They got me transferred to the General Hospital in Rouen. Enterers. Can't they just say the shits? Look, we all had the shits. But how does a son tell a mother that? I got back to base depot for Christmas. Even had time for a few smokos with some of the boys. Merry Christmas, Mum. Did the girls visit? Margaret? Eileen? Mary? Violet? Oh, it snowed here! It snowed and snowed. I got transferred back to the 24th in January. We were all issued with large white 90s as camouflage, but Fritz detected every move we made. If we lit a fire to keep warm or dry our clothes out, then he'd focus a couple of batteries and 6-inch guns on the spot. Supplies were in constant demand, and men who were recuperating from wounds often had to deliver heavy ammunition, food, tools to the front line. How does a son tell a mother hauling a pack of 30 kilos or more, trying to find his way through collapsed trenches and bodies of dead soldiers? He sank into the wet ground, wept, not caring whether he froze to death or became food for rats. I looked at my right thigh in disbelief. It was some time before the pain overwhelmed me. A gunshot wound. My first. It was almost a relief. In May 1917, I boarded the Panama for the mother country, the homeland. But she wasn't my home. And my home was far away. My mother wringing her hands in anguish for 2 sons she thought she'd lost. How does a son tell a mother that he trembles at night, that he may never walk again? But by June they got me fit enough for light duties. And in September I rejoined the 24th in France at Whitehorse. That was where I got my second gunshot wound. BANG! To the elbow. It was 3:30 a.m. and our whole company had assembled and all was quiet. Our only casualties at this stage were 2 officer ranks wounded. At 4 a.m, A company followed by B, C and D company in order headed out to jump off trench. At 4:45 a.m, we were all in position making use of old shell holes and trench systems. The enemy put down a terrific barrage. At 6 a.m, zero hour. Our barrage opened up and it made the enemy barrage sound insignificant. But their gunfiring and sniping continued and I was hit. I got transferred to the Australian General Hospital at Abbeyville. Hey, the wound wasn't serious. And then there was the third time. Gas wounds. My eyes streamed with water and pain. How does a son tell a mother that he clawed into his first aid kit for bandages to cover his burning eyes, nose, mouth, lungs, that no protection is provided, no gas masks or anything, that he put his hand on the shoulder of another soldier? He put his hand on the shoulder of another soldier. And they trudged 10 or 12 sightless men away from the front and into a world of nightmares. I was admitted to the hospital at St. Omar with gas wounds. Ace Records told my mother I could not. Some things should never be told.
In May 1918, Albert O'Connell was again sent to rejoin the 24th Battalion in the field, Mont St. Quentin. On the evening of the 30th of August 1918, Australians of the 2nd Division crossed to the north bank of the Somme River. At 5 a.m. on the 31st of August, supported by artillery, 2 significantly undermanned Australian battalions charged up Mont St. Quentin, ordered by General John Monash to scream like bushrangers. The Germans quickly surrendered, and the Australians continued to the main German trench line. In the rear, other Australians crossed the Somme by a bridge which Australian engineers had saved and repaired. On 1st of September 1918, Australian forces broke into Peronne and took most of the town. Also on that day, Albert O'Connell was wounded for the 4th time. Gunshot wounds to the right shoulder, right leg, right side and foot. The next day, Peronne fell completely into Australian hands. In 3 days, the Australians endured 3,000 casualties, but ensured a German withdrawal eastwards back to the Hindenburg line. Albert was initially admitted to hospital in Rouen, but subsequently transferred to the 3rd Western General Hospital in Cardiff.
This man's wounds are all gaping and very foul, Miss Harding. Give him another injection of morphine.
Yes, matron.
Albert died at 10:35 a.m. on November the 1st, 1918, from septic pneumonia. Mrs. Hedger Wallace of the Australian Red Cross attended his funeral. 2 days later, Germany surrendered.
Robert, would you take a look at this? 31st of March 1909, Adelaide. Frances Emily Pilkington, 27 years of age, recently instituted proceedings for divorce against her husband, Robert Hamlet Wayne Pilkington, 27 years of age, on the grounds of desertion. Today, she applied for an order to allow substituted service of copies of the petition and citation, as she did not know where her husband was at the present time. The petitioner said she was married at Wangaratta in 1900, and a few months later, her husband, who was a blacksmith, went to South Africa and served in the Boer War as a farrier sergeant. Mrs. Pilkington said her husband had given her only 10 shillings during the whole of her married life. What lies! And she says nothing of what we gave her. She says she received the following letter from him in September 1900.
Dear old sweetheart, I received your very welcome letter this morning, and being pleased I can respond to the full to it. I'm glad you are keeping well, and I ought to be kicked in the head for leaving you all to work for yourself. If Tom doesn't send for Ella in the next 3 months, I shall be coming home to you. I'm working for the CSAE now, contracting to strengthen bridges along the eastern line. Well, Paul, I would very much like to see your saucy face, even if it's on an old piece of cardboard. Oh, I went in for a big boxing beano the other week and knocked all the corners off all the blokes in one night. But never mind, love. When we are together again, I shall give up boxing for good, and I will have plenty of time to tease you. With fondest love and kisses from your boy, Bob. P.S. I wish I was spooning with you right now, instead of banging away a heap of steel ribbon. Well, goodbye, my little lady. Lots of kisses and sweet dreams. 12.
Followed by a lot of crosses. Here, you read the rest.
The petitioner said she had written many times to her husband in reply to this letter, but she said she had heard nothing of him since. Mr. Justice Cousin said further inquiries might be made to us the Tom and Ella mentioned in her husband's letter. And to allow time for this to be done, the application was adjourned.
In 1909, the case of Pilkington versus Pilkington was heard in the divorce court, and a decree nisi with costs was granted.
In 1915, Robert Pilkington, a single 38-year-old farrier, enlisted with the Royal Army Service Corps at Plymouth, England. He cited his next of kin as his parents, Robert and Jessie Pilkington, of 22 Hannon Street, Williamstown.
Robert proved himself to be a skilled shoeing smith. He was posted to Woolwich and subsequently transferred to No. 4 Sub-Company ASC at Park Royal.
He was appointed acting farrier corporal without pay and spent the next year on home service. In 1916, he embarked from Southampton with the 10th Auxiliary Horse Transport Company to join the British Expeditionary Force in France.
Robert was promoted to farrier corporal and was transferred to 8th Auxiliary Horse Transport Company. But in November 1917, he was severely reprimanded for making an improper reply to a senior NCO. He was also reprimanded in December 1917 for leaving his work without permission.
After 4 hospitalizations for an unknown cause, Robert was finally admitted to hospital in October 1918 with an aneurysm. He was transferred to Marseille and marked for transfer to England. He was admitted to 3rd Western General Hospital, Cardiff, Wales, with an aortic aneurysm.
On November the 11th, the war ended.
This patient can be discharged, Miss Wilson. Ask him to attend as an outpatient after Christmas.
Yes. Do you think you'll make it home safely? I hope so. Too many wives and mothers are grieving for men whose graves they will never see. Men who have died far from home.
I never thought that when I got into nursing I'd have to write letters to families in Australia.
We must do whatever is required, sister.
Robert Pilkington was readmitted to the 3rd Western General Hospital, Cardiff, almost a year later. He never did see his mother or father again. He died in November 1919 and was buried in a shared Commonwealth war grave in Cathays Cemetery.
Mrs. Pilkington had 6 sons, a daughter, and a son-in-law serving the Empire. The family was much celebrated in the local press.
Some 330,000 Australians served in World War I, 60,000 died, and 165,000 were wounded. The casualty rate was the highest of any country in the British Empire. A Mr. and Mrs. England of the Park in Llanyshan held a party for some of those who were nursed in the 3rd Western General Hospital in Cardiff.
World War I. The war to end all wars, so they said. But
The Greco-Turkish War. The Polish-Soviet War.
The Sino-Japanese War.
The Spanish Civil War.
World War II.
The Greek Civil War.
The Arab-Israeli wars.
The Algerian War. The Malayan War.
The Korean War.
The Vietnam War.
The Iran-Iraq War.
The Falklands War.
The Gulf War.
The Bosnian conflict.
The Afghanistan War.
The Iraq war.
The
War in Ukraine.
told all the fine young men, "Ah, when this war is over, there will be peace, and peace will last forever in Flanders, at Longpine and Beersheba, for king and